executive or startup founder looking to become a better leader? If so, then this episode is definitely for you. Welcome, everybody, to Owning Your Personal Brand. And this week, I am really excited to be joined by a CEO multiple times over and the current CEO of the diversity movement, Donald Thompson. Thank you, Donald, for joining us.
I'm glad to be here. This is super exciting. Looking forward to it.
Before we get started, can you just give a quick introduction of who you are, your background, and kind of what you're currently doing?
So, name is Donald Thompson Jr. I am currently the CEO and co-founder of the diversity movement. My background, I grew up in technology, if you will, on the sales and marketing side. And for a number of years was a bag-carrying, quota-driven sales professional, selling software to enterprise organizations. And then I shifted my focus in my career to marketing and was CEO of Walk West from 2018 to 2020. And then have transitioned to leveraging all of those skills to birth and create the diversity movement, where we basically help organizations build better workplaces through better conversations. And we have tools, educational seminars, as well as a platform that allows DEI to scale within an organization.
Good. Well, thank you for that. And thank you for joining us today. We're going to be talking about personal branding for the executive. One of the things that I talk about each week is how everyone has a personal brand, and it's really up to each person to own it, because obviously somebody else can own it for you and put things out there about you. So you want to make sure you own your brand, but it's really important if you run a company, if you're a C-level executive, or you're a founder. And so as we get started with that, talk to me about having a perspective and why that is so important as you work on developing your personal brand.
So one of the things that people get mixed up a little bit, it's a subtle distinction, but very important, is people have lots of opinions, right? And people use social media a lot to share their opinions. That's different than a unique perspective and point of view. A unique perspective and point of view is something where you have thought leadership power because of things you've done in that space. So an example would be, because I spent many decades in enterprise sales, I have a strong perspective of how small business owners can navigate the supplier process for enterprise organizations. That's a strong perspective. I have a strong perspective as an entrepreneur because I've started companies and grown them from $0 to $1 million very quickly, and obviously beyond. But from $0 to $1 million is the difference between survival, right, and failure, right? Once you get a business to $1 million, your chance of survival is much higher. Now you can dream bigger. So I encourage people to look at the portfolio of things they've done in their career, large or small, where they have a unique perspective that is backed up by their experience, failures and successes, because people that are wanting to be a part of listening and being a part of your brand story, they just don't want to know the wins. They want to know the valleys. They want to know the struggles. They want to know what you would have done different. They want to know the learning moments. They want to know when you were thinking about giving up, why you didn't and you continued. And so that comes to the perspective, but then the authenticity about what you're describing, because people want to get to know the real behind the scenes of how to make a business work and how to make a brand authentic.
That's really good. Two things that I want to follow up on. One is about sharing your failures, because people are really hesitant to do that. What do you think you can, what's some advice you can give to encourage people? Because obviously it's a better way to learn from the mistakes of others, but people aren't always open to sharing the mistakes they've made and the failures they've had.
It depends on what your goal is. So I'll talk about my personal goal. My personal goal is to be helpful. That's part of my brand story. And if I can be helpful, right, then people will talk more about me as a leader and the companies I represent, which will then turn into revenue. So being helpful means that I need to be somewhat humble and have a sense of humility about how I've gotten to the success I've got. If you are on a different side of the table, right, and you are trying to portray simply expertise, then you may or may not talk about your failure, because you're just talking about a single level of SEO, that you're a genius in SEO, and this is how I do it. This is my pattern. This is my methodology. My lane as an entrepreneur is building growing leaders, which means my lane has to be both expert driven, authentic, and relatable. And so because of my brand story, that's why I'm more comfortable doing it. The other thing I encourage people to do is don't take yourself so serious. You aren't the only one that made a mistake. You aren't the only one that has to overcome. Just stop it. You're taking yourself a little bit too serious. No one cares like that. What people want to know is that you're honest enough, truthful enough, real enough to listen to. And the mistakes give them the confidence that if you can do it, they can do it too.
Yeah, no, that's good. The other thing you pointed out is the difference between your opinion and the actual perspective. And I think that is really, really important because you're not just talking to talk, but you've got to back it up with what you've actually done and how you have expertise. So I think that's the other important, really important part. Okay, let's move into your own personal brand. And can you talk a little bit about your journey of number one, when did you realize that you were building your brand? And then number two, what kinds of things have you done where you've seen success in actually building that brand?
All right, so let me start and be authentic and humble. About 15 years ago, a PR agency came into my office. I was running a software firm at the time, and they said, Don, you need to be a thought leader. And I said, you need to get out of my office because I don't need anything but leads so that I can sell more, so that I can grow my revenue. And they were like, no, Don, if you're a thought leader, people will see your expertise and then they will come to you. I said, I can show you what we're going to do. You can get out of my office and we're going to make more phone calls, because I didn't understand the credibility gap that was keeping me from growing my businesses larger. And so that's what turned the angles. I had to rethink how business is done at the highest level. If you think about enterprise corporations or small businesses, we all live and die by referrals, our networks. The stronger your personal brand, the more easily people will want to recommend you. That thinking is what transformed me. So what I started doing and using platforms like LinkedIn, like Instagram, like Facebook, like Twitter, everyone will have their own style. For me, I've really fallen in love with LinkedIn because by and large, LinkedIn is a business-focused community. People are not on there sharing their cookbook recipes. They're not showing their kids eating their first Cheerios or whatever, which all is beautiful stuff for Facebook, Instagram, other platforms. But LinkedIn is still a business-driven community by and large. And I think people have held to that, which I appreciate. And so LinkedIn gives you a platform to describe who you are, why you matter, and what you can do for clients. So I recommend to most folks that are in the business side of growth, LinkedIn is very, very powerful. A thing that people will say is, well, I don't know where to start. And I was there also, right? Start by commenting on posts from others that you like. Just give them a like, comment on them. Thank them for that new information or knowledge, number one. The second thing is post on LinkedIn things that you are learning or are experiencing. So if you, for example, read a new book, talk about that new book. If you read an inspirational quote that has business application, talk about that business application. The other thing that you can do is promote new authors, white papers, or websites that you feel are powerful. People enjoy folks on LinkedIn that aren't just talking about self, but are being helpful with great information. I'll give you an example. So Teresa Sand wrote a book called Find Your Fierce. She was on one of my podcasts. The focus of this book is imposter syndrome. How do you eliminate it? How do you overcome it? How do you work through it, right? And everyone at certain levels experiences that fear, uncertainty, and doubt as to whether or not they can win in the arena that they're in. So by sharing with you in this moment, this book by someone else that I've interviewed, that I know, I'm sharing with you a way to support a challenge that you may have. And that never hurts me to uplift someone else, share information that's valuable, and be helpful to you. So that's the way that you create credibility in building your brand while you're trying to figure out what your own voice is. But you're at least getting started in the platforms, in the motion, et cetera, like that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's like one of the biggest challenges is just getting started. And like you said, people are like, "Oh, I don't have anything to talk about. I don't know where to begin." But that's actually the hardest part. And once you do that, and then you start to be consistent, and you start to see people that you're helping, I think that is important too. For me, I always thought, well, I need to have accomplished something else in order to, start building a brand. But people really do like the journey and seeing where you are, where you started, the things that you're doing. That's actually really helpful to people. So for me, as somebody who's at a different place than you as far as branding, it's actually been good just to share with people what I'm working on and what I'm learning along the way. So that's really good advice. But getting started is like the best.
That's
piece.
exactly right.
That's the hardest thing to do. And so let's talk about you mentioned credibility a lot. How can people get more credibility, that third party validation? What are some ways that people can gain that so that they do build more trust and everything as they're working on the personal brand?
Yeah, think about what a business wants if you had a good experience at their company. They want you to write a review. They want you to use some public platform to share your positive experience. Well, encourage your clients, your partners, to do that same thing on LinkedIn, on the social platform. So for example, right, if they're writing a post and they're talking about marketing expertise and they tag Creative Allies and Amie Thompson, that is a way to get third-party credibility, right? Another way is when you are doing someone a favor, you're helping them or you're referring business to them, you can say, listen, I'm doing this because I believe in what you're doing. If you feel led to, right, hit me up and give me an endorsement on LinkedIn, right? So the biggest thing in developing third-party credibility initially is you have to ask people to do that for you, that you've helped, that you've been successful. That's number one. The second thing that is super helpful is when you start to create content. Say, for example, if you create a newsletter on LinkedIn or you create a blog or you have a website or like you do, you're creating this owning your own personal brand webcast, right? I hope that's the right term, webcast, like you now have guests that will have a great experience with you. Make sure that they're sharing that back with others. And then at a higher level, when you talk about PR and comms and communication, now all of a sudden you're looking for people that will endorse you by having you on their podcast. I was on a podcast a couple of weeks ago, and the gentleman has like multi-million downloads. That was powerful third-party credibility, right, for them having me on their show. My articles that I write on WRAL Tech every week, WRAL has given me, I provide them lots of content, so it's a lot. We're on like 107 articles now.
Gosh. Okay.
Right? But they are allowing me to leverage their platform. That's credibility. And then I'm giving them credibility because I'm giving them great content that their readership can leverage. So we've created a win-win situation that we're all really, really proud of. And so when you, for example, go in and tag WRAL and my articles, you're giving third-party credibility to Donald Thompson and WRAL. And so it creates that momentum, right, as you grow.
Yeah, no, that's really good. And I think that something you said that is also hard, asking people, right? Asking for people to support you or people who already support you, but just asking them to, share one of your posts or something like that. It's really funny because, like you had mentioned before, we get so much from referrals, yet for some reason it takes people a long time to ask for that and to ask someone to help them. But everybody's willing to do it. And it's kind of like get out of your own way a little bit.
I'm writing that down because when I think about referrals, when I think about my network, right, none of us do the simplest things enough.
Yeah.
None of us.
Yeah.
And it holds us back. And it's an interesting thing, but I like to think about it like this. It's been very warm, hot in North Carolina the last couple of weeks, really around the country, but I live in North Carolina. I'm thinking about me. And so there's been weeks where we've averaged in the hundreds, right? Well, if you have a cold set of water bottles in your trunk, and you see somebody outside that's walking, and you offer them an ice cold water that's safe, that's buttoned up, all that good stuff, and they say no, you don't care because it's 100 degrees and you're going to enjoy that water. But most likely they're going to be thankful and thoughtful that you thought of them because you had something to share. We're willing as humans to share something with others. We're easy to donate to the goodwill. We're easy to donate to Habitat for Humanity, our time, our money, our effort, right? But we think a little bit too selfishly about asking for referrals in our network because we don't have the proper self-esteem that what we do is valuable and helpful to others to grow their business. You're in the communications business. So when you help somebody grow their brand, grow their business, grow their leads, that puts money in the pocket of their family, for their kids, for their finances, for their future. So therefore, you should be emboldened to find people that need your cost-effective, high-impact services. But we have to think about it in the right frame.
Yeah.
We have to think about it more other-centered, and then we'll do more.
Yeah. Confidence is so important in everything we do, but definitely around personal branding. And one of my past guests said, it's kind of funny. Personal branding is not really always personal because it is about helping other people and what you can do for other people. But it's that confidence, like you said, in knowing that what you do is valuable so that you're not afraid to talk about it and ask people to help you. So that's very interesting. The last thing I wanted to touch on is learning. And that's something that I know you're very passionate about, continuing to grow. So talk a little bit about why that is so important to you, but also important. It should be important to other leaders as well.
So I'll give a couple of things, and I hope we have time. This may get a little long-winded. One, based on my background and pedigree, I went into corporate America without finishing college, without a college degree, without an engineering background, even though I sold engineering software, right? So every person that I came in contact with was more highly educated, more experienced in the field, so smarter, if you will, than me at every turn. I used to have to prepare hours for 30-minute meetings with my own team, let alone somebody outside the organization, right? It taught me a couple things. Number one, no matter how complex you think something is, you can learn enough to use your talent to be helpful. So while I was not a software developer, I understood and learned project management. While I was not a software developer, I understood marketing and packaging of software. While I was not a software engineer, I understood how to take software and partner with larger enterprise software organizations to build strategic partnerships. So I found ways within a very technical organization to create and build value, but I had to learn. I had to read, I had to study, I had to go to conferences. I had to sit with engineers making fun of me because I didn't know the nomenclature, and then still pay for lunch. Right? Like literally they laugh at me about the questions I would ask them for an hour, and I paid for lunch, but I learned every time. Here's the thing that's important in my growth. I didn't think anything was beyond me to learn enough to be effective and share value and grow value. Number two, learning is inexpensive. Ignorance is expensive. And there's a lot of free resources where you can learn, and especially with how powerful the internet is now and all the different learning platforms, it's really an intentional focus. And then here's the cool thing, the final thing. Most successful people love to teach. And if you show yourself a willing and open learner, you're going to find the most successful people actually give you more time because they always want to share and grow in what they learn, by and large. And so because I knew that, when I was in meetings with very successful people and I was on sales calls, I would say frequently, hey, if we finish this hour meeting in 45 minutes, can I take the last 10 minutes and ask you a couple of questions about your career? maybe get some advice about mine. And doing that over a period of 10 years, I developed a lot of powerful relationships and a lot of powerful knowledge just in ending meetings 5 minutes early and asking a few questions. And so those are things that allowed me to become a competitive learner. And those are things that people can do, most people won't. So
Right.
that's why I'm going to beat you. That was my mindset. Simple things that most people can do, that most people don't, which is why I'm going to win. Because I try to do the simple things over and over again to get that competitive advantage. And I needed it because I always had a chip on my shoulder, because I always knew I was under my initial corporate pedigree was underwhelming. So I had to live by the results and I had to live by the learning.
Mm-hmm. And I think there's a part of being humble in there too, because I think a lot of times people don't want to admit that they might feel like they're not as educated, qualified, whatever. So then they don't ask those questions. Like you said, you were fine. I mean, maybe you didn't have a choice or whatever, but you were like, okay, they're going to laugh at me. Fine. But I'm going to learn so that I can have these conversations with the clients, etc. So there's a little bit, not just confidence, but also being humble to just know where some of your gaps are and being okay to ask people. Because like you said, people will help if you ask them.
Absolutely. And the other thing that I will say is you also find out what value you can give to someone else
Yeah.
that is teaching you something. So back to the engineers and computer scientists that were laughing at me. Once they started to get to know me, they saw value in me getting them more time for their projects if they needed, getting more support, because I was unafraid to go fight with other executives to change the budget, the project, the things that they may need, a computer with higher computing power. And so I figured out how to help them win.
Yeah.
And then they wanted now to help me be stronger because I was helping them be strong. So once I got enough strength around me, right, then I was able to now create win-win scenarios. And that was super fun also.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's good. Thanks for sharing that. To wrap up a little bit, I guess the last thing I'd ask you is just some advice that you might give people, again, focused on personal branding for executives. What kind of advice would you give people to get started and kind of get over that hurdle, but just to get started?
Invest in, and this sounds wild, but invest in the best headshots and images that you can afford, right? And that's whether it's a friend that has a camera. And here's the thing about digital cameras. You can take as many pictures as you need to get a good one.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody knows how many you took, right? Number one, because that's one of the first things that people see, right, on your LinkedIn profile, XYZ. So you need to look the part that you're trying to portray in your personal brand. Number one. Number two, right, start. The advice is just simply to start, like we talked about, right? How to overcome that fear, how to grow. But here's the thing that I think is most important, the advice I would give, is you have to remember that it's a long-term program for it to work.
Mm-hmm.
It's like our health. It's like getting stronger in the gym. It's like learning a new dance step. It's going to take time and effort, and that repetition
Mm-hmm.
is where you're going to win long-term, right? And that's where you've got to start the seeds, plant those seeds so that things come up over the next year, 12 months, XYZ. And then the final thing to remember is, what's a single lead worth to you? So if a single lead is worth $5,000 to your business, if a single lead is worth $10,000 to your business, then what's 10 of them worth to you? And when you start doing that math, now all of a sudden you realize how little it takes for the personal branding to pay for itself 10 times.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're only looking for 5, 10, 15, 20 people that need what you deliver to know you, trust you, and call you.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. Well, I appreciate everything you shared with us today. And before we wrap up, let's talk a little bit about some of the things you're working on. You mentioned WRAL Tech Wire. Tell people kind of what do you write about and what they can learn if they take a look at your weekly column.
So one of the things with WRAL Tech is it's technology focused, but I usually look at a blend of technology, leadership, diversity, equity, inclusion. And so I write from the mindset of who I am and what I'm living. But I talk about DEI not so much from a social justice standpoint, but from a corporate standpoint of how to make and build a better workplace. And so that's a theme. And then the other theme is leadership development, because at every level, whether we're a CEO or whether we're an intern, you can learn how to be a stronger leader at whatever level you are in the business. And so those are some of the lanes that we work on with the WRAL Tech article.
Good, good. And then how can people connect with you and also learn more about the book that you have coming out soon?
Oh, thank you for giving me that space. You're super gracious. So LinkedIn is very easy to connect with me. You can leave me a message there. You can go to donaldthompson.com and in the info session there. I'm very available. What I would say is I'm very responsive, but that's going to take a day or two or three. I get a lot of inbound, but I do respond when people reach out, whether it's a question, whether it's a cup of coffee. I'm very active in building and growing relationships. In terms of the book, Underestimated, which I've been working on for a number of years, you can go to donaldthompson.com and just scroll down on the homepage, and it'll give you all the information about the book. Has a lot of funny stories about me growing up, my nickname, my parents moving from Bogalusa, Louisiana in the South, and me moving to Lily White, Connecticut, and that journey, right, of growing as a leader through stories and life experiences is what I would share through the book.
Good, good. Well, again, thank you so much for being here and joining us. And we've actually covered quite a bit. I think a couple of the main points to take away is get started. If you are working on your personal brand, working to become a better leader, get started now. Small doesn't matter, but just like Don said, it's a journey. And so get started now, and you never know where you'll be in 12 months, 24 months if you actually are consistent with it. Be humble and be confident. Know what your value is, what you bring to other people, and focus on helping other people, not so much just promoting yourself, but promoting yourself in a way that's helpful to other people is important as well. And so, like I say every single week, every one of us has a personal brand. It's up to you to own it, manage it, and develop it. And I think this week's episode, we covered a lot of tips and things that you can do to really get started and develop your brand. So thank you so much for joining us. And I hope you have a great rest of your week. Join us next week with a new guest, a new topic on owning your personal brand.